Mr Kenneth Yalowitz, former US Ambassador to Georgia, welcome to this exceptional Georgia Today interview.
I'm delighted to do that and delighted to participate in this interview.
You served as the US Ambassador to Georgia more than 20 years ago. It was at that time when Georgia Today was slowly gaining popularity. Could you recall some of your memories related to a newspaper?
I have very fond feelings about Georgia and the Georgian people. And certainly, Georgia Today, is part of that good feeling that I have. Yes, it was 23 years ago. I do remember the interview. Georgia 23 years ago obviously was very different, than it is today. We were very concerned about the quality of journalism, in Georgia. We were hoping, for objective, clear, fact-based, journalism. And Georgia Today was a breath of fresh air. It was in English, which of course was, very, very helpful, but it was already a very quality publication. The presentation was very nice. It was very well edited. The articles, were objective. They were, much along the lines that we were hoping to see, in Georgian journalism. And that was why I agreed to do that interview all those many years ago, because I was always very careful with my interviews to do them, with publications that I knew that would present me objectively and, not doctor my words in any way. So I congratulate you on 23 years and wish you many, many more years of good success.
As for the former ambassador to our country, wasn't it disappointing to hear that the US sanctioned Georgian judges?
In the years, that I was ambassador, judicial reform was one of the key things that we were hoping would develop, in time. And I worked at that point very closely with Misha Saakashvili, who was then, I think he was Minister of Justice. I mean, he had a number of, positions in which we worked very, very closely on judicial reform. Saakashvili did clean up a lot of petty corruption in Georgia, to his credit. But unfortunately, as I say, the judicial system is a very tough nut to crack, and it still has not been cracked. It is still a serious problem. I prefer to leave it as saying that 23 years later, seeing that the problem is still there, still very serious, is a great disappointment to me. It's a problem, as I say, that runs through all the administrations. Everyone has a share in the blame for it. And I think the answer now is, if Georgia, aspires to be a candidate member of the European Union, this is something that is going to have to be rooted out. It's going to have to be dealt with, and these corrupt judges are going to have to be dismissed, and the system is going to have to be corrected. I think that is where I would come down.
How likely it is that by appointing a new ambassador, the US will drastically change its policy towards the ruling Georgian Dream Party, which blames the US itself for attempting to drag Georgia into the war?
That is a very good question. I myself have been extremely disappointed with the way that Ambassador Degnan, has been treated in the press, publicly, has been criticized falsely by the government officials. I thought this is something I would never see after my time in Georgia. Georgia, right now, under Georgia Dream, is pursuing sort of two objectives. One is, the Western vector, to join the European Union, to join NATO. The other is obviously to get along with the big neighbor to the north. And we supported, when the Georgia Dream came to power, the idea that, better relations with Russia was in everyone's interest. And when trade increased again, tourism increased, that type of, improvement of relations we all welcomed. But what is going on now, when we are being accused of trying to drag Georgia into a war, which is totally false, when so many of the things that I see coming out of Georgia from Georgia Dream supporters really reflects more of Russian propaganda than objective truth and reality. Our hopes for Georgia and our policy direction will not change with a new ambassador. And I'm just hoping when the new ambassador arrives that she will be treated with the respect and openness and cordiality that I was treated with in my 3 years in Georgia.
Even though many of our Western partners were concerned about the health issue of former President Saakashvili, the Strasbourg court rejected his request to transfer him outside of Georgia. I'd like to ask you to tell us your opinion about Saakashvili.
Saakashvili is one of these figures that is larger than life, that when we use that expression. He did some very good things for Georgia in terms of cleaning up corruption and building up the institutions of the state, really focusing attention on Georgia as a progressive country moving in the right direction. But at the same time, we all know that he had very, very significant flaws. And I saw those even when I was, ambassador in Georgia. His commitment to democracy, his commitment to fair judicial system when he was in office, I think, left a lot to be desired. The jails were full of people. If anybody was charged, almost automatically they were found guilty. A number of corrupt businessmen were dealt with not through the courts, but basically told, pay us $1 million lari and, you'll stay out of jail. That was not good, for the justice system. One thing that was very good with him is he left office peacefully and without trying to do a Putin, to stay in power in a different position. When he lost, he exited, and that is something, that will be to his, lasting credit. I know the Strasbourg court just made this decision, but the thing that has concerned so many people outside of Georgia is it looks as if, he's being maltreated. It looks as if, an ex-president is being treated because of his political, viewpoints. I think it would be very beneficial for Georgia, despite what the Strasbourg court said, to get him into a situation where his health can be evaluated properly, to remove that stigma, that he is being persecuted as a political prisoner. I don't think Georgia needs that now.
You served as the ambassador not only in Georgia, but in Belarus as well. What was your reaction to President Lukashenko blatantly violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Georgia by visiting occupied Abkhazia?
Lukashenko, is another one that I know very well. His list of political sins is enormous. Air piracy, supporting Russia, in the war, false elections, jailing, protesters, breaking up parades, and his visit to Abkhazia. I would just add to that long list of unprincipled actions, which really diminish his respect for Georgia's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. I saw that he was ill in Moscow at the recent parade. I don't know what's wrong with him, but I think Belarus will be a much healthier country, a much more directed in the direction of democracy if the opposition, Tikhanovskaya, comes to power there through elections. Lukashenko, to me, runs a living museum of the former Soviet Union. It is a country that is backward, is corrupt in many ways, is authoritarian, and he is the father of that system. I saw him in place that system in Belarus, and as far as I'm concerned, we do not respect him. We want free and fair elections there, and to my mind, the sooner the better.
Mr. Kenneth Yalowitz, It was my pleasure to welcome you to this exceptional Georgia Today interview. Thank you so much.